everybody, and welcome to this EuropeActive podcast. And there's a number of podcasts that have happened, and hopefully you've been listening to them over the past few weeks. I'm really excited today to have Liz Terry, who you all undoubtedly know as the editor of HCM, amongst a whole stable of great quality industry magazines, who has been hugely active both with her magazines and on social media and driving forward points, comments, and remarks during these difficult times, and particularly during the sort of second lockdowns and how government and how we should react, and has been certainly for the UK, but also across Europe, a great guiding light on opinion, who will lead and contribute to this conversation. And you all know Andreas Paulsen, who's the Executive Director at EuropeActive, and one of those people I always term as a great policy geek and public affairs person who knows how all these things pull together, and has done some fantastic work cementing EuropeActive's own key manifesto strategies around health, community, digital, and standards during this period, and playing in those headings into the environment we live in. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Liz to lead this conversation, but I will add I'm expecting loads of contributions from Liz as well, because she has some great views on this particular topic.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, and hello everybody. I think the first thing to kick off with, because we only have 25 minutes, is the big picture, the policy, the government liaison work that's been being done. We have made incredible strides through the good works of EuropeActive, EuropeActive, and the industry, lobbyists, just to become visible to governments. I truly believe we were largely invisible to them before this pandemic. It will be good to chew over where we are with this at the moment, what still needs to be done, and how we're going to make this next stage of the journey. And what we learned in second lockdown, it was very clear that we should not have been locked down a second time. We produced evidence to show that gyms were not a source of community transmission. We produced evidence to show that they did nothing but good in terms of helping the mental and physical health of the population. So how can we make sure that we don't get locked down a third time, I think, is the big question everybody's asking now, whilst celebrating the fact that we're starting to reopen in some parts of Europe. So yes, to the short question is, what's the next stage in terms of influencing governments? Both of you have done a lot of lobbying. Very much welcome your views.
I'm going to start the answer only because I could see Andreas was on mute, and I was worried that he was going to start talking there without taking himself off. But I'll start only just to take it back a long way. I take it right back to my UK Active days, and having seen what's happened with the great operators who have joined with UK Active and the progress they've made in this second lockdown, I think that one thing that we have learned and we must focus on is that it is crucial that throughout Europe that we have an ear with governments. I think that one of the things that certainly has come out of this this pandemic is when a lot of countries went to their local governments, because of course health is a local issue across Europe. They frankly didn't know who they were talking to. And so we need to up that game, and I'll hand over to Andreas to talk about how that is going about. And we need to be a single voice, because if you're talking to government, it needs to be a single voice both across Europe at national level and not divided, whether that's public, private, or whatever it happens to be. And then I guess finally that move to that health agenda. But you know, that's how I see it. It's almost fast forwarded as to where we've tried so hard to get, particularly in UK for so long. It's been fast forwarded there, and now we need to be professional enough to sit at that table. Andreas.
Yes, I would say when we speak with a Europe-wide perspective, obviously the UK has perhaps the biggest, the largest and most successful trade association in Europe, and in many respects one of the oldest ones. Of course, many countries in Europe are not as well consolidated and established with a proper trade association. So the first step, as Dave said, is to really organize the sector and to have a proper trade association to be able to speak with one voice, so that politicians will know who to speak to when they want to speak to our sector. So that's the first step that we are trying to ensure as EuropeActive across Europe, that we help the countries establish trade associations who haven't already got one. And on the other hand, we help the existing trade associations to be as strong as possible, to help them with the right arguments, the right knowledge, to identify the right people to talk to, how to write letters, and so on across Europe. So first step is to speak with one voice, to have a proper national association. The second thing is to have good relations with authorities and politicians, and that we've had to improve on quickly during the pandemic, of course. Some national associations, for example, the EuropeActive, the Danish Association, DFHO, the NL Active, Portugal Activo, and others already had strong relations with government, but it's something that needs to be built over a long time, and it's something that takes a long time to create these proper relations with authorities and government. But we have tried our best to help identify the right people to speak to, and to help our national association partners provide the right arguments to them. And then the two last bits that are really important is that we are able, as you mentioned, Liz, to demonstrate the safety of fitness and exercise facilities. Many of you will know our Safe Active study. The final report is coming out next week, and where we've documented with 2 European universities the very low COVID-19 infection risk numbers in fitness and exercise facilities across Europe. That's one very important argument to provide to politicians and authorities. And the other is really the health and economic impact of our sector. We have, relatively speaking, relative to other sectors, we have very relatively weak data really documenting our sector's health and economic impact in society. And that we are starting to build up and to make sure that our national association partners, that they have this data and this research and can provide those arguments for keeping our sector open to authorities and politicians. Yeah. So those 4 elements are really key to being successful in.
I mean, we're knocking on the door of the medical sector in every way we possibly can to get engagement there, to be useful and to start to provide those kinds of services. Is that really our destiny? Is that the final destination for us?
I think that you raise a great point, Liz. We're knocking on the door of the that medical sector and health, and that, of course, if I hark back, for some it'll be the dream solution. It is such a big opportunity and is so influential in society. And people will go, gosh, we've been handed this on a silver platter on the back of a pandemic because of the importance of health and fitness in terms of immunity. But we do need to take into account that we get onto the same plate as the pharmaceutical industry, where some of those companies are bigger than our industry, and they're not going to be having the same arguments as us with their lobbyists. And we also need to be very aware that there is an opportunity of this alienating, some parts of our sector in terms of the professional and level of standards that need to be reached in order to satisfy this area. And to Andreas's point, Safe Active becomes one report, and there are others. You just need so many. You need so many peer-reviewed medical things that are proving categorically, beyond doubt, that exercise within fitness facilities, not just exercise, but within fitness facilities in those communities, makes a difference. And we need to build that data up quickly and very professionally. But there will be many challenges.
I mean, it could be that it's just a part of it is the way that we message what we do. Because, we have one message for consumers, we have another message for how we transact with each other. It could be that we just need another message for government. We were talking earlier about group exercise, and my awful suspicion that group exercise is being banned because it's got the word group in it. I haven't been able to find any other reason to explain why it's being banned. And if that's the case, and the government is taking that kind of very top line view of things, it's about groups, we've got to ban groups, therefore we're going to ban this. It could be partly how we explain ourselves. If we put that across as a lung health workout, potentially maybe they would allow it. So I think that I'm not being fatuous in saying that, but it is in part how we explain ourselves. We do an awful lot of very good good work already that is very much to do with health and wellness that could be easily interpreted in that way. Greg White made a very interesting comment in a post that we published in our latest issue, that over 60% of all cancer rehab and prehab services are already delivered in leisure centres and gyms. And yet we're not pulling out these threads, and we're not putting these in front of governments and representing ourselves in the way that could be transformational, I think. So what are your views on that?
Yeah, I'm going to go to you, Andreas, but very quickly, I read that piece for Greg White, and I had no idea. I mean, for me, that's just extraordinary, an extraordinary piece of evidence. And when we spoke earlier, and you mentioned that group thing, I keep smiling because it seems so simple, and I think you might be right, because what we have always, as an industry, we just say Group X. We just always said it, and we need to be professional enough to realize how that might be interpreted by somebody who is really almost just looking at keywords, because they're looking at so many industries. It means and a wrong decision is made by it. It will be incredible if that is the reason, but I can understand how it could be. So
I'm sure it's a contributory factor, even if it isn't the main reason.
Andreas, sorry.
Yeah, as you all know, we have put health at the very top of our manifesto as our most important priority in the coming years, and we define health in line with the WHO. So human health is defined as physical, social, and mental health. All of those three key parameters of health we need to demonstrate to official public decision makers how we provide as a sector, because we have felt and seen during the crisis that public decision makers aren't aware of the great impact that our sector has, for example, in terms of mental and also social health. Even though we have a pandemic and governments are looking at limiting social interactions, we can be social in safe ways, and our Safe Active study and other studies have proven that we can safely keep group exercise open. And if we can argue with governments and convince them that we can help people be social in a safe way around fitness and exercise, so that we don't get the negative impacts of physical inactivity during the crisis, then we have a prevailing argument. And we have seen that in the Netherlands, in Denmark, and in other places, that we have been able to convince governments that we are about physical, social, and mental well-being. And we can be social, not as physically closely as we used to be, but in safe ways during the pandemic, and therefore make sure that citizens are as healthy and that we provide as much well-being as possible during the pandemic.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this whole pandemic has highlighted huge social inequalities, and this is not being talked about enough. It's not being tackled enough. It's something that people in our industry feel very passionately about, and they're standing by to take action to remedy this and to do their bit to help to address these inequalities. You're much more likely to die from COVID if you're from certain social groups. So again, I think that's something which we could be, I'm sure we are lobbying on that matter, but again, that could be spread out far more into the industry in terms of getting the whole industry behind those kind of initiatives. Do you believe at EuropeActive that this is a fundamental human right as well? Should we be talking about human rights in relation to the right to exercise and the right to keep yourself fit and the right to access these types of facilities as a fundamental, in the same way that there's a right to education and a right to medical care?
I would say what is a human right that relates to how we come out of this crisis. I think we should be hesitant, but that's perhaps coming from a slightly different political, philosophical place. I think we should be hesitant to call everything a human right, because then the real essential human rights perhaps become less sort of relevant or impactful. But I think what should be considered a human rights and that can help us reinvent ourselves as a sector and gaining a stronger place in society as we come out of the crisis is the way that we perceive and treat our clients and members, so that we should open up our minds and address our own identity about fitness. That we become more open-minded and more welcoming towards non-traditional fitness users. So we've spoken with our DEI group. We've spoken about individual human dignity, that we make sure that everybody, regardless of background, whether they're fit or not, are treated in a welcoming and respectful way in our sector. And I think to a very large extent, when we talk about having a large-scale health impact, the biggest obstacle to that, in my opinion, is our own self-perception, to be honest. We need to look self-critically at ourselves and move beyond traditional, the traditional sort of fitness self-image, and be much more welcoming towards non-traditional fitness users. Seniors is one group, but also people with disabilities, people who are just not likely to be self-driven towards fitness. That's where the big market opportunities are, and that's where we can have a huge and positive impact in society. And the more we grow that impact, the more we'll be recognized by politicians and authorities in the future. So I think the biggest path to growth and recovery for our sector moving out of COVID-19 is very much working with our self-perception and our professional identity, and again realigning, repositioning much more towards health and focusing broadly on health rather than just traditional fitness.
And do we need to adjust existing businesses to expand their range so that they can accommodate a wider type of clientele, or do we need new businesses to welcome these people? What are your views on that?
I mean, where we can have the biggest impact health-wise is really to have the broadest possible part of society of citizens to become regularly physically active, even at a relatively limited level. If we can just get people to get a little bit more physically active, then we'll have a huge positive impact on public health, of course. So it's not that complicated. What we need to do is, for the past decade, I've been part of building up a medical fitness chain in Denmark, where we are very successful with seniors. And the things we do for seniors is very much centered around social health and well-being. So we create senior clubs where seniors are walking to the local theater together, and going on hiking trips, into nature and stuff like that. It's relatively simple stuff, but it needs to be structured for them, and you need the social element to motivate people and to have people feel sort of committed to do the regular exercise on a regular basis. So I think.
Yeah, but I would say, Andreas, I think that's a great example, but as an exception rather than a rule within our current fitness facilities. And all kudos and congratulations for you doing that. And I'm not on this call saying no one else is, but very few are. I remember as a club operator a long time ago, every time I opened a new facility, I said, you're a gym facility and I'll tell you when you're a club. You're a club once you know your members, once they're fully involved in the community, once you're listening to them, once they're part of a group, once you are that point of the society, and work very hard at that in a local authority environment. And we didn't stand alone there. We were quite good at that. And I take that right down, forget about the going for war. Even if that was a wine club or a curry club within it, it was creating a community of people who were very much felt part of that. And to Liz's point, whether it's new and different type of facilities or the existing facilities getting better, I think that's what they need to do. We undoubtedly need at club and operator level, and I would say at national and international level, to be listening to, speaking to our communities and our members. They've been really vocal. Gosh, they couldn't have been more supportive of us in this period, through newspapers, blogs, linked up. So many members have spoken out, and in some ways I don't think we've entirely our facilities have justified their support. But if there's ever been a time where I've think we should be saying to clubs, you need to drive your communities, understand your communities, and build them. It's right now to be doing things like what you just spoke about and things like that.
It's been one of the outstanding happenings of this second lockdown for me, just the amazing engagement that we've had from our members, and I think that does raise a lot of questions about how we go forward in terms of expanding that engagement and asking ourselves, who's going to own the wellness consumer going over the next 10 years? Will it be us? Will it be apps? Will it be Apple Health? And we are in a battle for the wellness consumer. And the fact that they have so wholeheartedly supported us through this lockdown, and I think been one of sort of partly instrumental in getting us reopened again, just because the government heard them. Governments are hearing them all around the world. That's a huge project for us to harness that and to nurture those relationships. I just have to figure out how, and I don't think it necessarily needs to be mechanical. Apps are great, hybrid models are great, but there has to be some humanity behind that, doesn't there?
I think that the whole industry humanity is key to it. I mean, you've talked about, and we've seen Apple moving into the space, and we have to see how we positively embrace that, and Amazon, and there's been this whole tech bit and the at-home offering and all the rest of it. But all these things, all these different devices and different ways of communicating need the human touch, and people want to communicate.
People have really, I think it's really, the lockdown, the second lockdown particularly, has really made people appreciate us more. I think they can really feel what they're missing when they can't get to the gym. The first lockdown was just a lot of very disorientating, a lot of people very scared. And then we came back out and we traded for some months and people got back into their routines. And to lose that again, it really did bring it home. So this is when the petitions started and the consumers started to be more vocal. The big challenge, as I said at the beginning of this, I think, is to avoid, and particularly in the UK, to avoid a third lockdown, because particularly if it came in the new year, that will be devastating for the operators in terms of the finances. So that's probably the final question that we have to chew over. What can we do to avoid a third lockdown?
Yeah, I think it's really about becoming those essential providers of health and well-being, that strategy, and of course safe places of promoting health and well-being. That's really the strategy we've seen working in the countries that have been allowed to stay open, including the UK, of course, and I think we've addressed it quite well in our manifesto with the 4 key areas of improvement that our sector needs to go through in terms of repositioning towards health, providing or building the proper digital infrastructure to be able to connect with our consumers outside of the brick and mortar facilities. It's about community, how we relate with community, the general public, our consumers, political decision makers, authorities, and it's about standards, that we improve our professional practice and that we become able to work with, for example, physiotherapists, doctors, and so on and so forth, and really ensure that our sector is seen as a grown-up and mature sector, that we are professionals, exercise and fitness professionals in the proper sense. So I think those 4 key areas is where we need to go, and it's even essential to our immediate response during the coming months. So I think we have the recipe for staying open.
I think that you're exactly right, Andreas, but and your last point to what Liz says, the immediate, because it is the immediate. January is just around the corner, and none of us can pretend we're not nervous that there is going to be another lockdown, and there's many of us who think that's exactly what's going to happen, because that's almost part of a bigger policy. But we know it's about safe spaces, cleanliness, and all the things that we're being told. And it doesn't matter whether you're the biggest operator, resourced, or the smallest operator, you have an obligation to the industry to be entirely professional during this time. We cannot, wherever you're down, let us down. It cannot be a hotspot because we made a mistake, because we didn't have the cleaning standards, because we didn't follow. It really can't. That the cards will crumble and all the effort that people have put in. I say that believing that the whole industry is really doing that, but now is the absolute, because it would be a travesty, you know, with this vaccine there or thereabouts and just about to happen. January we know is crucial, all the pressure that people will be under. So we can only be the master of our own destiny to a certain point, but we can in terms of hygiene, cleaning, everything off at that, and we must do it. It's not an option, it's a priority.
Well, I mean, what we don't want to happen is for the government to use the vaccine as a veil for just hoping people will accept a further lockdown if it isn't justified. Have we got time for one more question?
Well, I think we're pretty there. Let's get one question. Yeah, go for it, Liz.
I just had one thought, and it's around obesity. So we did some research looking into which countries allow gyms to stay open, and we correlated that with obesity levels in those countries. And we found that the countries which allowed gyms to stay open were the ones with the lowest obesity levels, and the countries that locked down the gyms were the ones with the highest obesity levels. And we thought that was a pretty interesting correlation, and we published a story on it. Now, if you talk to people in this industry about weight loss and obesity, that they get a bit squeamish and they don't really feel that this industry should be talking about weight loss and obesity. So it's something the industry isn't really messaging on, if you like. But we know from a scientific point of view that if you have excess body fat, you're much more susceptible to COVID. So from a policy point of view, do you think that as an industry, we should have a bit of a change of tack when it comes to our messaging on obesity, and maybe as part of this shift to medical, be making more of a case for how we can help people to control their levels of body fat? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
you go, Andreas.
Yeah, I read the article, and I think the correlation is that those countries tend to be the countries that are prioritizing physical activity, relatively more than the countries that are, with the higher obesity levels. So that's perhaps the countries where our sector is recognized as being essential to public health. So I think that's the correlation.
Yes. But it's effective in terms of the results it gets, is the point we were trying to make. So, you acknowledge that there is an issue in this industry with talking about weight loss and obesity, and it's a bit of a sensitive subject. So do you think that it just needs to stay that way, or should we be less reticent about it and actually say, genuinely, we can help people to control their body fat and become less susceptible to COVID? We have to face the fact that this virus is going to be around a long time, even with a vaccine. We're going to have to learn to live with it. We've all acknowledged that.
Should definitely.
I don't think you can avoid the. We know that nutrition is the crucial part of that conundrum, but nutrition is a crucial part of health and should be a crucial part of fitness and health too. So, yeah, I understand that people can shrug their shoulders and go, "Oh, that's not my area." If we want to move into the health agenda and we want to influence that, then we have to be bold and embrace that and say how we can work on, that we are part of that solution. And nutritional advice and helping people in that area has to become more of a key area of our offering, I would say. Yeah.
I'm not suggesting we start fat shaming. It has to be done well, but absolutely. I do think that we could help there.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I'm aware that we're there with time, and I think we could have just chatted on for the rest of for the next few hours. Just remains for me to really thank Andreas, and really thank you, Liz, for chairing that and putting forward those questions. To wish everybody out there who is watching this and listening to this to walk the walk, talk the talk, make a difference, get involved in your community, and we will strive and go forward. The next podcast, which will be led by Andreas, will be around inclusion, which falls into our community pathway of one of the things, and it's absolutely crucial, and somewhere an area that we've had some great people join on the group that are pulling together a way forward on that, and on this particular podcast, we're going to have Rachel Young, who many of you will know is currently, as you know, part of the MyZone team, but is working with EuropeActive in this area, and Tony Stone, choreographer to the stars, frankly, a fantastic individual who has spoken so eloquently on race and the subject and the Black Lives Matter and the rest of it, and is really a force to be reckoned with, and is very determined, along with the rest of the team, to drive this forward. So I think that will be a fantastic discussion. So thanks once again, Andreas, Liz. Thanks for listening, everybody, and goodbye. Thank you. Bye-bye.